eastern Idaho, 1832. As bullets whiz by them and the sounds of gunshots fill the air, a group of Blackfoot warriors urge their galloping horses towards a small lake ensconced in the mountainous terrain. Behind them, in hot pursuit, ride several American fur trappers, firing their single-shot rifles and pistols to the best of their abilities while riding atop their galloping mounts. With little option in the way of escape, the small group of Blackfoot warriors take to the frigid waters of the small lake. Here, with their horses in water up to their withers, the warriors now launch arrows towards their attackers. The fur trappers in hot pursuit are momentarily stalled, not wanting to risk bogging their horses down in the water by furthering their attack. They retreat to a position on the banks of the small body of water under cover of the area's abundant timber. From here, they trade shots with the waterlogged Blackfoot, assuming their quarry to be trapped and all but assuredly doomed. But this Blackfoot hunting party the trappers have happened upon are in fact only one small part of a larger band of Blackfoot camped only a few miles away. When one warrior on a particularly fleet pony makes his way back to their village, reinforcements are quickly gathered, and in mere minutes, a force of hundreds of Blackfoot warriors are mounted and charging out of the camp towards their brethren who are trapped in the waters of the lake. Soon, it is the American fur trappers who are on the defensive, as the newly arrived Blackfoot reinforcements pour over the hilltop behind them. At the head of the attack is a Blackfoot chief named Eagle Ribs. He is a member of the Buffalo Society and among the very few warriors allowed to wear the horns of the buffalo as a headdress. He rides in front of his warriors, all among them incensed at the trappers' attack. In the preceding few months, the Blackfoot had killed numerous fur trappers in the area, along the Yellowstone and Gallatin rivers. They are, without question, the most feared tribe among the trappers here on the northern plains. The Blackfoot are a powerful warrior tribe, the ruling power here on the northern plains, a title they have earned through years of ruthless expansion after the introduction of the horse to their people sometime in the 17th century led to a veritable explosion in capabilities in both hunting and raiding. Now, as they turn the tide of the trappers' attack, a shudder flows down the spines of the once bellicose mountain men, as all among them know that, while being killed by the Blackfoot will surely be a terrifying end, it will pale in comparison to the agonies that await them should they be taken alive. Now, under a hail of arrows and bullets, the trappers are forced to retreat from their position, abandoning their attack and riding back towards their own camp, several miles away. Just minutes prior to their arrival, the camp had been a typical scene of activities, with men carrying out chores, repairing equipment, and checking their inventories. But as the first riders fleeing the Blackfoot race into camp, the routine of the morning is quickly broken, and it is readily apparent to the trappers that they will now have to take immediate action in a fight for their lives. Now, the men amongst the trappers' forces will soon face the full might of the Blackfoot's martial prowess brought to bear on them here in the middle of the wilds of the Idaho mountains. Among the trappers is 28-year-old Jim Bridger, one of the most experienced among them, and for all intents and purposes, their elected leader. Bridger has seen more of the American West than most living men. Born James Felix Bridger in Richmond, Virginia in 1804, Bridger had come west like so many countless other American young men in the early 19th century, in search of adventure and fortune. As a teenage neophyte to the frontier, on his first trapping expedition, Bridger had been part of the seminal Ashley's 100 fur trapping expedition that set out from St. Louis in 1823. While on this initial foray into the world of the mountain men, Bridger had been one of the two men charged with remaining with Hugh Glass after his now infamous misfortune of being severely mauled by a mother grizzly in present-day South Dakota. Glass, a legendary trapper in his own right, and already a noted veteran by the time Jim Bridger arrived on the frontier, had been so badly wounded that his comrades, unable and unwilling to linger in a dangerous hostile native territory for what they saw as an exercise in futility, had left Bridger and another trapper named John Fitzgerald to remain with Glass until he inevitably expired from his wounds. But as Bridger and Fitzgerald fretfully waited hour after hour in the frigid, dangerous territory for their comrade to finally succumb to his condition, he proved amazingly and frustratingly resilient. Though he appeared to continue to decline, Glass simply refused to die. After their nerves had been sufficiently rattled by the prospect of being captured alive by hostile natives, they had weighed their options and chose, regrettably, to leave Glass to his seemingly inevitable fate. They had eventually made their way back to civilization, where the young Bridger had joined up with another fur company, and Fitzgerald had gone on to join the army. But Hugh Glass did not die. Instead, in a feat that is now etched in the annals of frontier legend, he managed to survive and effectively drag himself hundreds of miles to the nearest fort, where his wounds were treated and his life miraculously saved. Once recovered, Glass had eventually sought revenge on Bridger and Fitzgerald, but found Fitzgerald now under the protection of the U.S. Army and Bridger to be just a teenage boy. He ultimately forgave the youngster and Fitzgerald out of the charity of his own heart. Despite this relatively inauspicious start, Bridger would remain undaunted in his pursuit of life as a mountain man. In the fall of 1824, he would become one of the first white men to explore the Yellowstone region of present-day northwestern Wyoming. Here, he was one of the first Americans to lay eyes on the parting of the waters at Yellowstone Lake. In 1830, he was part of a group that bought out the legendary Jedediah Smith's stake in what would come to be known as the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, a trapping outfit composed of several members of Ashley's 100 who sought to contest the powerful John Jacob Astor's monopolist American Fur Company. By 1834, however, with the decline of the beaver population and growing difficulty in turning a profit in the fur trade, the Rocky Mountain Fur Company was bought out by the American Fur Company and absorbed into Astor's corporate structure. In 1835, Bridger had married a woman named Emma from the Flathead tribe, a people who resided in the ranges of what is today western Montana and eastern Idaho. The couple would ultimately have 3 children together, necessitating, or perhaps excusing, Bridger's constant excursions with fur trapping companies into increasingly less profitable and increasingly dangerous territories. In this year of 1836, Bridger and his troop of fur trappers are on their way to the yearly rendezvous that will be held in present-day Idaho at a place called Pierre's Hole. The rendezvous is an annual tradition amongst the mountain men and local tribes, one that affords all a brief, fleeting respite from the drudgeries and dangers of life on the frontier. The furs and hides that had been so arduously gotten in the preceding year would be traded and sold. Goods and supplies would be bought and bartered for, and all could partake in the ample good food and drink. Songs, dances, gambling, gossip, as well as romantic liaisons between lonely mountain men and native women, all abounded. Though not the debauched and overtly drunken scene that is often portrayed, the yearly rendezvous was a lively and exciting affair. Bridger, as well as the rest of the mountain men in camp, had long looked forward to the affair, and now, with the rendezvous only days away, it had briefly seemed to all that they could almost taste the flowing hard cider and freshly baked breads. However, now, any thoughts of rest and recreation are quickly dashed as the influx of their comrades riding at full speed pours into the camp. The cry of "Blackfoot" quickly spreads throughout the camp, and now Jim Bridger and the rest of the trappers scramble to their single-shot rifles and make ready for the fight to come. The trappers take their positions in a loose battle line facing the direction of the approaching Blackfoot, and, for a few eerie moments, they can only hear the thundering hooves and war whoops of the warriors rapidly closing in to make their attack. Then, suddenly, the war party crests the top of the hill overlooking the campsite. Seeing the defensive line of mountain men protecting the camp, the Blackfoot pause atop the hill, just outside of rifle range. For a harrowing few minutes, a nervous tension permeates the air, as both parties warily appraise the size and strength of their opponent's forces. However, as the nervous trappers eye the sizable war party atop the hill in front of them, one amongst their party carefully and excitedly searches the lines of the mounted warriors, hoping to see a familiar face. She is the wife of one of the trappers, a Mexican man named Loretto, who had bartered for her freedom a number of years earlier after finding her as a prisoner of the Crow. She is, in fact, a member of the Blackfoot tribe. Though taken from her people as a young woman, she is intimately familiar with Blackfoot culture and customs, and, having not visited this territory for several years, might very possibly be a long-lost relative or friend to the attacking Blackfoot. While she finds no comfort in searching for a familiar face, what happens next brings a brief glimmer of hope to herself and all amongst the trappers. Calmly and coolly from atop the hill, Chief Eagle-Ribs now rides forward with a small group of warriors, bearing a pipe of peace and gesturing for the trappers to send a group of their own to discuss peace negotiations. Now, Jim Bridger enlists the help of the Blackfoot woman to act as an interpreter, and Bridger, the woman, and a small group of trappers now make their way towards the expanse between the two lines, all the while wary of a surprise attack from the Blackfoot. As an off-putting silence overtakes the battlefield, it seems to many present that all that can be heard is the plodding of the two parties' horses towards one another. As he rides in front of his group, Bridger begins to scan the line of Blackfoot warriors to the rear of Eagle-Ribs and his contingent, growing increasingly concerned as he nears the spot where the proposed negotiations are to take place. In only a precious few seconds, his suspicions overtake him, and as he, the other trappers, and the Blackfoot woman are mere yards away from Chief Eagle-Ribs and his men, with the chief now extending his hand in a gesture of peace, Bridger attempts to quietly pull back the hammer on his single-shot rifle. But in the tense silence that has befallen the would-be battlefield, the minute action resounds with a voluminous click, audible to all of those present, especially to Chief Eagle-Ribs. The Blackfoot chief instantly grabs the barrel of Bridger's rifle and thrusts it towards the ground. As he does so, Bridger attempts to pull the trigger and shoot the chief, but his bullet merely fires harmlessly into the dirt. Now, a violent struggle ensues between Bridger and Chief Eagle-Ribs, and within moments, the entirety of both parties, with the exception of the Blackfoot woman, are in a full-pitched fight. As Bridger and the chief fight from atop their horses, another Blackfoot warrior sends an arrow whipping through the air and slamming into the small of Bridger's back. Moments later, a second arrow strikes just above the first, both projectiles embedding themselves deeply into the unfortunate man's torso. With Bridger now reeling in pain, Eagle-Ribs now seizes the rifle from his hands and strikes Bridger from his horse with a powerful blow that Bridger at first assumes to have broken his neck. For her part, the Blackfoot woman takes this opportunity to flee back to the lines of the trappers and her husband and infant child. The Blackfoot warriors, however, quickly thwart her escape, cutting off her path and driving her back towards the Blackfoot. The distressed young mother now becomes irate, screaming inconsolably to be allowed to return to her child. The Blackfoot at first appear unmoved, but after recognizing her as a member of their own people, Chief Eagle-Ribs instructs the young woman to call out to her husband and ask him to bring the child to her. He assures her that her husband and child will not be harmed. Minutes later, the nervous young father plods cautiously across the veritable no-man's land that lies between the trappers' lines and the Blackfoot. He assumes that he will likely be killed as soon as he reaches the Blackfoot, but drives himself on in hopes of at least delivering the child to her mother. To his surprise, he arrives at the Blackfoot lines unharmed and is allowed to hand the child over to his wife. However, this is where the charity of Eagle-Ribs and his warriors has been exhausted. The man is instructed to now leave his wife and child and return to the trappers. He is promised that he will be left unharmed as he crosses and that his wife and child will be cared for. The unnerved trapper now makes his way, again, across the expanse of mountainous prairie, feverishly wondering if he has seen his young family for the last time. For the time being, it appears that he has, as the Blackfoot now take their newly returned tribal sister and her child with them as they sink over the hills and into the wilderness. The befuddled, heartbroken young father can only watch on. Meanwhile, though the Blackfoot have now left the battlefield, Jim Bridger's troubles have only begun, as the two arrows lodged deeply in his lower back now cause him excruciating pain with even the slightest movement. As his blood-soaked shirt is cut away, it is apparent to his attending brethren that extracting the arrows will be a difficult, painful process. While one of the arrows is pried free with relative ease, the second remains lodged immovably. The arrows employed by this band of Blackfoot are steel-tipped, acquired from trade with the British. Unlike their stone predecessors, these tips do not break or shatter, but bend and hook upon impact, making the extraction of a warped arrowhead all but impossible. After several excruciating attempts, the decision is made that the arrowhead will have to be left. The mountain men present, acting as rudimentary though serviceable physicians considering the circumstances, agree that any further surgical incursion into the wound by their untrained hands will only cause more damage. And so, the bent steel arrowhead is left where it has struck, embedded in the soft tissue of Jim Bridger's lower back. In this pitiable condition, Bridger is now forced to endure the agonizing ride to the rendezvous. The long-awaited trip is all but spoiled for the young mountain man, as his pride is also significantly wounded, having suffered not only the arrow wounds, but the theft of his rifle by the Blackfoot chief Eagle Ribs. Though Bridger is able to turn a substantial profit for his year's worth of trapping, the limitations of his condition only serve to dampen his spirits. But this will not be the last time that the legendary Jim Bridger will meet with the feared and fearsome Blackfoot. Though he will carry the arrowhead in his back for the remainder of his life, Bridger will return to the frontier in only a matter of weeks, and over the course of the succeeding years, he and his trapper cohorts will meet the Blackfoot in countless brutal confrontations in the fight to control the northern plains. But the many stories of the fabled life of Jim Bridger, as well as the countless instances of heroism, ferocity, selflessness, and tragedy that will occur in the battles between the mountain men and the Blackfoot in the years to come, are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the Join button below. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.